The wind pressed against the windows of the house as though trying to get inside. Emily sat curled in the armchair with a blanket over her knees and her phone in her hand. The glow from the television lit the room in shifting shadows. Her parents were out for the night. They had left early for a dinner across town and promised to be back before midnight. The house felt larger without their voices. Every creak of the old floorboards sounded sharper. Every flicker of the lights seemed louder. Emily told herself she was fine. 16 years old, almost grown. She was used to the house, used to the hollow noises it made in storms. She set her phone on the coffee table and tried to focus on the movie playing in front of her. The voices on the screen rose in laughter and then in screaming. She reached for her soda, and in the pause between scenes she heard it. A low sound. A heavy knock muffled from below. Her head turned toward the kitchen door. Beyond it, the narrow stairwell led down into the basement. Her parents always kept it locked when she was younger. They told her the old stairs were unsafe, the floor uneven, the pipes open. As she grew older, the lock came off, but the basement remained a place she rarely went. It smelled of dust and damp air, and the light bulbs never seemed to burn for long. She reached for the remote and lowered the volume. The knock did not repeat. For a while she sat frozen, blanket tight against her chest. She told herself it was nothing more than the house groaning. The storm outside shook the windows. The trees scraped the roof. It could have been anything. Emily forced herself to stand, crossed to the kitchen, and checked the back door. It was locked. She checked the windows, each one secure. When she passed the basement door, she hesitated. The silence behind it felt heavy, as though something waited there. She touched the doorknob, found it cold, and let go quickly. She returned to the living room and sank back into the chair. The movie played on. She could not follow the plot. Her eyes kept drifting back toward the dark frame of the kitchen. The air in the house grew still, heavy with a strange weight. She tried her parents' number, but they did not answer. They had warned her that reception at the restaurant was poor. She told herself she did not need them. It happened again. A scrape, low and dragging, as if something moved across the cement floor beneath her. Emily muted the television. The sound came once, twice, then stopped. Her breathing grew shallow. She picked up her phone and turned on the flashlight. White light cut the darkness. Her hand trembled. She rose and walked to the kitchen, every step careful. The house seemed to hold its breath. She reached the basement door and listened. The silence pressed against her ear. She waited, gripping the phone tighter, and then pulled the door open. The smell of cold stone drifted out. The staircase descended into a rectangle of darkness. The bare bulb above the stairs hung by a wire, its pull chain dangling in the air. She aimed her light downward. The beam slid over the steps, over the concrete floor below, and caught the edge of the old washer. Nothing moved. Emily told herself she only needed to look. One quick check, then she could return to her chair and forget the noises. She set her foot on the first step, then the second. The wood groaned under her weight. The air grew colder as she descended. Her light flickered against the walls, showing shelves lined with boxes, old jars, stacks of tools her father rarely touched. She reached the bottom. Her shoes touched concrete, damp with patches of dark stain. She swept her light across the basement. The shadows shifted, long and sharp. For a moment everything was still. Then the scrape returned. Not in front of her, but to the far corner, beyond the furnace. Emily froze. Her mouth went dry. The beam of her phone shook as she turned it. She stepped forward, slow, heart pounding. The scrape came again, and this time it was followed by a sound she could not mistake. Breathing. A low, ragged breath, drawn in and forced out. Her voice caught in her throat. "Who's there?" The basement swallowed her words. No answer came. The breathing continued, uneven, too heavy to be the wind through pipes. She took another step. Her light landed on the furnace, its iron door rusted, its pipes stretching up into the ceiling. Beyond it, in the far corner, the shadows were thickest. She lifted her phone higher, squinting into the dark. For an instant she saw movement, a shape withdrawing from the light. Her chest tightened. She stumbled back a step, nearly tripping over the uneven floor. The sound of breathing grew louder, closer, as though whatever hid in the shadows had moved forward. She raised her phone higher, the light shaking in her hand, and whispered again, "Who's there?" Something shifted. A scrape across the floor, a shape sliding into the edge of her beam. At first it looked like fabric, dark and torn, trailing across the concrete. Then she saw fingers. Pale, thin, curling against the ground as though pulling a body forward. Emily gasped and staggered backward. Her phone nearly slipped from her hand. The light wavered over the thing in the corner. It pulled itself closer, dragging its body through the shadows. She caught the outline of a head, tilted at an unnatural angle, hair hanging in long clumps across a face she could not see. She bolted up the stairs, heart hammering. The wood groaned under her weight. She slammed the basement door shut and twisted the lock with shaking hands. Her breath came fast. The silence pressed in around her, broken only by the storm against the windows. She backed into the living room and clutched her phone to her chest. She tried to call her parents again, but the call failed. She tried her best friend's number, but it rang without answer. She texted, fingers fumbling, but no reply came. Her eyes darted to the kitchen. The door stood locked. The basement beyond it waited. She pressed her ear to the living room wall, straining for sound. At first there was nothing. Then she heard it. The scrape again, slow, deliberate, dragging up the stairs. She ran to the front door. The lock clicked under her hand. She yanked the handle, but the door would not budge. She pulled harder. The knob turned, the deadbolt slid free, but the wood remained in place as if nailed shut. Panic spread through her chest. She ran to the windows. Each one resisted her hand. They rattled but did not open. The sound came again. A knock against the basement door, steady and strong. The frame shook. She backed away, trembling. The knock came once more, then stopped. Silence filled the house. Emily stood frozen, waiting for the next sound. Seconds dragged into minutes. Nothing happened. She told herself she had imagined the things she saw. Shadows and fear, nothing more. She tried to believe it, though her heart would not slow. She returned to the armchair, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. The television flickered without sound. She stared at the images without seeing them. Her phone lay in her lap, screen dark. Every tick of the clock on the wall echoed through her ears. The quiet broke again. A soft creak, not from the basement this time, but from above. From the second floor. Emily's eyes widened. She looked toward the stairs leading up to the bedrooms. The creak came again, as though weight pressed down on the old boards. She shook her head, whispering to herself. No one was upstairs. No one could be. Yet the sound grew louder, a slow step, then another. Her voice cracked. Mom? Dad? No answer. Only the sound of footsteps moving across the floor above. Emily stood, hands trembling, and edged toward the staircase. She held her phone like a weapon, the beam of light shaking against the walls. She placed her foot on the first step, heart racing. The noise above stopped. Silence hung heavy, thick enough to choke her. She waited, listening. The quiet pressed close. Then a door upstairs slammed, hard enough to rattle the frames on the walls. She screamed and stumbled back. The sound echoed down the stairwell. The house grew still again. No footsteps. No scraping. Only silence. Emily backed into the living room, clutching her phone. She wanted to run, to escape, but the doors refused to open, the windows held tight. She was trapped. She sank into the corner of the couch, eyes on the shadows, waiting. The night stretched on, broken by distant thunder. The clock ticked. Her parents did not return. Somewhere in the house, something moved, waiting for her to make a mistake. The clock on the wall showed 11. The hands ticked forward with a sound that seemed louder than the storm outside. Emily stayed in the corner of the couch, every muscle tight. She held her phone against her chest, afraid to shine its light again. The memory of what she had seen in the basement lingered. The pale hand, the dragging shape, the heavy breath. The house was quiet now. No footsteps overhead, no scrape on the floor. Only the occasional groan of wood under pressure. She wanted to believe it was finished, that she had imagined everything. But her skin still prickled with fear, and her heart refused to calm. She forced herself to rise. She could not sit waiting. She had to try the doors again. She crept to the front, placed her hand on the knob, and turned. The latch clicked free. She pushed hard. The door shifted an inch and then stopped, as though something pressed against it from the outside. She shoved with both hands. The frame groaned, but the door would not move further. Her pulse pounded. She left the front door and tried the side door by the kitchen. It too opened a fraction and no more. She moved to the back door. The same. It was as though the house itself had locked her in. She ran to the windows. She tried each one, first in the living room, then the kitchen, then the dining room. All stuck fast. The glass rattled under her palms, but the frames would not budge. She leaned against the wall, trembling. The air felt heavy, too thick, as though the walls had closed in. She pulled her blanket tighter, but no warmth came. She turned on the television again, trying to drown the silence. The screen flickered, but the channels only showed static. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She gasped and looked down. A message had appeared. The sender was not in her contacts. The words read, "Don't go upstairs." Her breath caught. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. She wanted to believe it was a trick, a prank, but the timing was too perfect. She typed a reply with trembling fingers. "Who is this?" No answer came. The screen stayed blank. She waited, but the phone remained silent. She set it on the table and backed away. The ceiling creaked above her head. Slow, deliberate steps moved across the floor. Emily's chest tightened. She covered her mouth to keep from crying out. The footsteps moved from one side of the house to the other. A door upstairs groaned open. Her phone buzzed again. She grabbed it with desperate hands. A new message appeared. "It's not your parents." Her knees weakened. She staggered against the wall, clutching the phone. She could not breathe. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She stared at the staircase. The shadows seemed deeper there, as though waiting. She told herself to stay where she was, to wait until morning. But the silence pressed too hard. She could not sit still. She needed to know what was moving above her. She crept to the stairs, phone light cutting the dark. She placed her foot on the first step, then the second. The wood creaked. She froze, listening. Nothing moved above. She climbed higher, each step a struggle. Her breath shook in her throat. When she reached the landing, she swept her light across the hall. The doors to the bedrooms stood closed. The carpet stretched silent beneath her shoes. She stepped toward her parents' room. The doorknob glinted. She reached for it, then stopped. A sound came from the end of the hall. Her brother's old room. Empty for years. She turned her head. The door there stood open. A faint light glowed inside, as if a candle flickered. Emily swallowed hard. She forced herself forward, step by step, until she reached the doorway. She leaned inside. The room smelled of damp earth. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. In the center of the floor sat a figure. It was the shape she had seen below, hunched and dragging. Its back bent at an impossible angle. Its hair hung long and wet, covering its face. Pale hands gripped the carpet. The figure rocked back and forth in silence. Emily's hand shook so hard the phone light quivered across the walls. The figure stopped rocking. Slowly it lifted its head. The hair parted enough for her to see a mouth, wide and dark, stretched in a grin too large for a human face. She stumbled backward, nearly falling. The figure crawled forward on its hands, joints bending wrong. The sound of its nails dragging across the carpet filled the hall. Emily turned and ran. She sprinted down the stairs, nearly slipping on the last step. She ran for the kitchen, pulled at the back door, shoved with all her strength. The frame groaned but held. She screamed and pounded her fists against it. Behind her, the floor creaked. She spun. The figure stood at the top of the stairs. It leaned against the railing, head tilted, hair hanging forward. Its mouth stretched wide again, that terrible grin. Emily grabbed a chair and hurled it against the window. The glass shattered, but behind it she saw not the night outside but black stone, as though the house no longer sat in her neighborhood, but in some enclosed cavern. Cold air seeped in, thick and damp. She screamed again and ran back to the living room. The television blared static. The screen showed not pictures but shapes, dark figures shifting in the snow of the signal. She grabbed the remote and shut it off. The silence that followed pressed against her ears. Her phone buzzed. Another message appeared. "It's already inside." She dropped the phone and backed away. The lights in the house flickered once, twice, then died. Darkness swallowed everything. She fumbled for her flashlight, turned it on, and swept the beam across the room. The figure stood in the corner now, closer than before. Its grin gleamed in the light. Its head tilted farther, as though the bones of its neck were breaking. Emily bolted for the basement door. She yanked it open and dashed down the stairs, desperate to escape. The air grew colder, heavy with the smell of mold. She reached the floor and swept her light across the concrete. At first she saw nothing. Then she saw shapes. Dozens of them. Figures hunched in the corners, crouched against the walls, faces hidden by long hair. All of them rocking, silent. When the light touched them, they stopped moving. Emily's scream tore through the basement. She stumbled backward, dropping her phone. The light rolled across the floor and landed near one of the figures. A hand shot out, pale and sharp, seizing the phone. The screen went dark. She turned and ran up the stairs, but the door above slammed shut. She threw herself against it, pounding with both fists. It would not move. Behind her, the sound of dragging filled the air. Dozens of hands scraping the floor, dozens of bodies shifting forward. She clawed at the door, sobbing, until at last it swung open. She tumbled into the kitchen, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The house shook with the storm outside. She looked for her phone, remembered it was gone. She had nothing left. She pressed her back against the wall, trying to think. She had to last until morning. The light of the sun would break whatever held the house. It had to, but the storm outside did not fade. The clock on the wall did not move. Time itself seemed trapped. The floor creaked again above her. She looked up and saw a dark shape leaning over the banister. The grin stretched wider. Emily's scream filled the house.